Now that we're entering the fantasy football playoffs, the strategy on the waiver wire completely changes and everybody overreacts. And I can legitimately tell you, you could lose a league if you do it the wrong way. So in this video, I'll give you the players to add, the guys to avoid as well, all in one video, and strategies that nobody else on YouTube is going to tell you. So if you appreciate that, drop a like for me. I will personally go through and DM your league mates and tell them to sit week 15 out so we can get an advantage. And hit that follow button for more videos through the playoffs like this as well, starting with the priority list of Jaden Reed. Then we will go into the proven playoff waiver wire strategy. So we start with him. People see him at 9.3 fantasy points and don't think it's that good. They write him off because the Packers offense uses so many wide receivers, which is true, but he only played 50% of the snaps. He had 4 targets on that and he ran 17 routes. That's not necessarily terrible whatsoever. That involvement will skyrocket up forward, and when that does, he is their slot number 1 wide receiver. You can expect him and Jaden Higgins to get an increased target share. Another guy who didn't have a terrible game last week if you look at his fantasy point numbers, but definitely not what we want to see. We know this was a matchup problem. It was always going to be a tough one that you're not starting him in. The Chiefs defense is very, very amazing. He gets the Cardinals in week 15, so him and Dalton Schultz are also starts there in that matchup because they need to get a playoff spot themselves. We can also go through and get Kayshon Boutte coming into a matchup against the Bills, coming off their bye week in a matchup in itself that should speak for why we should add him off the waiver wire, still under 40% of leagues. And also, I'm recording this video very early, so Dario Gumbawale becomes a top waiver wire add if Nick Chubb and Woody Marks are not good to go this week against the Cardinals, which is a positive matchup. So just monitor that because, again, this is a really early video I'm recording. But there are 4 main playoff strategies and tricks nobody else is going to tell you. The first one is that you have to be dropping your useless players. Now, before I get into that, what I mean by this is drop the players like Chimere DK, Isaiah Pacheco, Ramondre Stevenson, players that are still projected a decent amount of points that you maybe could start, but they're not going to break out, and you would never actually want to put them in your starting lineup. They're just dead space on your bench. Number 2, once you do that, you can go through and roster your opponent's needs. For example, if your league mate just lost Zach Ertz, or maybe they just lost Daniel Jones, this is your time to go pick up and add the top quarterback or top waiver wire tight end, even if you don't necessarily need them or are going to start them, because it puts them at a disadvantage. So look at your opponent this week and see exactly what he's lacking in and where he'll probably go on for the waivers. Same for quarterbacks, same for wide receivers, every single position. Just look at your guys, drop the Ramondre Stevensons on your bench, and go from there. I have a full video of the unethical playoff strategies coming later this week, so if you don't want to miss that, make sure to be subscribed and have your post notifications on as well. And another tip here is to pick up multiple defenses. Stash for the coming weeks. This is one of the most underrated tips nobody talks about because you don't want to have to fight on the waiver wire in week 16 or possibly 17 if you get there and not get a good defense and possibly lose a week because of it. You can also use the strategy we just talked about with defense. Pick up a defense that your league mates want. Pick up multiple defenses. Don't let them get the best players off the waiver wire. And if you need to, you can also go pick up those 1-week flyers that earlier in the year we didn't really love doing. It seems simple, but at this point in the year, there is no reason to have those stash potential breakout players if they haven't broken out yet, because you're not going to be starting them. And this week is more important than ever to do that and get the waivers right. So again, ask any waiver wire ads in the comments as those potential problems or questions you're going to be answering, and I'll be in there helping you guys out there as well. But we can officially start this video with the running backs and Blake Corum leading the Rams in goal line opportunities last week, which is an insane thing to say. But also, the Rams coaching staff has come out and said that they are giving Kyren Williams time off to keep him healthy for the playoffs. This is normal. We see this a lot in the NFL. They have a playoff spot pretty much locked up. They're not going to put him on the field for every single play and risk him getting injured, which is why we saw Blake Corum go for 12 carries, over 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Put that into perspective. If you still have Fab, Blake Corum can be one of the top guys to spend it on. He gets a very tough matchup, though, against the Lions this week, which isn't positive. Like, you're not necessarily going to be throwing him into your starting lineup guaranteed, but the usage in the pass game is really what's worrisome because the Lions defense allows the number 1 least amount of fantasy points to running backs, and he doesn't really get that. You look, Kyren Williams is still dominating there, but still, he is a top ad if Kyren were to ever get injured or if they were to sit him for a game, whatever it may be. Blake Corum is a top ad, just like Jalen Wright as well, but there are a little bit more complications with him off the waiver wire than people are talking about. Yes, he dominated in snaps after Devon Achane cracked one of his ribs, which sounds insane. Like, there's no way I would play through that, but he's an NFL player. He'll probably just take a cortisone shot and be perfectly good in the next week, which is a negative matchup against the Steelers defense. So don't throw all of your fab on him thinking those 24 fantasy points is like the next league winning running back. Still worth an ad though, an elite handcuff running back. But this is a situation of riding the hot hand because we saw last week, Ollie Gordon was the primary number 1 backup to Devon Achane in that first drive that he got injured. But then Wright quickly took that over with the hot hand. Everything had 24 carries compared to Gordon's 5 after that first drive. So regardless of that, even though it could be a little bit more boom or bust risky into the next week, he's still a handcuff at the very least. You want to be rostering those handcuff running backs because the Dolphins do have top 5 matchups for the rest of the fantasy playoffs after this week as well. But outside of those handcuff running backs like him, Bashal Tootin, Tyler Algier, the top wide receivers are probably going to be more of a value this week. So Devon Vele is going to be number one. When he's been dominating in opportunity, which he has ever since he's really been traded to the Saints team, he's been doing amazing. Like ever since their bye week, he's been tied up right there with Chris Olave. A clear 2 wide receiver system is what they're running in New Orleans right now. And Tyler Shuck is actually playing pretty decently. So he's definitely worth an add coming into their matchup this week versus the Panthers. It is a negative matchup as far as fantasy points allowed, but we know Chris Olave is going to garner the harder cornerback matchup of JC Horn, and it's not going to be as negative for Devon Vele, so maybe he gets a little bit higher of a target share because of that. And we can also take into account that Chris Olave has been dealing with his back injury for the last month. Every single game, he's questionable, not really on the injury report, but kind of there. And there is a chance that they just sit him and shut him down for the rest of the season. At some point, if he keeps dealing with this back injury, they are way far out of the playoffs. They are eliminated. And then Devon Vele, in the small chance that that happens, would be a wide receiver 1. Those are the kind of guys you want to roster, so you should be adding him and Ryan Flanoy as well. Only because of the potential that CeeDee Lamb misses week 15 against the Vikings. Flanoy has been amazing in his opportunities without CeeDee Lamb this year, averaging about 20 fantasy points in those games, and he just had a legacy game last week. Now, even if the coaching staff is saying CeeDee Lamb had a good day on Friday, the NFL concussion protocol is not as lenient as coach speak is, because we know coaches can say whatever they want. It really doesn't matter to them what they're saying to the media. The NFL protocol for concussions is very, very tough to beat. It doesn't look like, especially with what we saw on the field last week, that he's going to pass that and come into this week's matchup. Even if it is a somewhat negative matchup against the Minnesota Vikings defense, this team is number 1 in passing volume, which is exactly why Flanoy is getting the opportunities that he is. You can also go through and add Isaiah Likely consistently increasing in his opportunities over the last month, despite his touchdown fumble and a couple miscues from his side. Last week, he dropped 12.5 fantasy points, which could have been better, again, if he didn't technically drop the touchdown that was in his hands and then got punched out. Whatever. If you guys saw it, you saw it. Reason is, he could have had a better day, and he's out-targeted Mark Andrews over the last 2 weeks, 12-11. The issue is, they're always going to be splitting snaps. Like, these 2 tight ends will always be on the field. The good news, though, is that Lamar targets the tight ends some of the most in the NFL, especially in the red zone, leading in tight end target share in that part of the field at over 30% of his passes going to that position. Now he's coming into a matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are top 1, allowing the most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Even before the Bills just destroyed them this week, 38.7 total points they allowed to the Bills tight ends, they were still number 1. So Isaiah Likely is a start if you do need it, and you can even play defense against your league mates if they need a tight end as well. Unfortunately, Marcus Mariota is going to be a top 10, top quarterback for us this week coming into the matchup against the Giants. They are top 7 in fantasy points allowed to the position. There should be no way that Jaden Daniels comes back this year and plays. Part of that might be coming from a Commanders fan, but I really do not think at this point, again, they're way out of playoff contention. There is no point after Jaden Daniels got banged up. And Marcus Mariota has been averaging just under 20 fantasy points per game in his starts there. So if him and Jacoby Brissett are out there, they're the top 2 quarterbacks to stream for this week. But the must-add defenses coming into week 15 with kickers as well, possibly the most important because you can, number 1, play defense and pick up a bunch of defenses. But number 2, they really do win leagues. So the 49ers are going to be your number 1 option, and they actually don't get terrible matchups now for the rest of the year either. So they would be my number 1 I'm putting all my fab and priority on because they get the Tennessee Titans this week. Haven't really been looking that terrible as of the past few weeks, I'm not going to lie, but the Tennessee Titans are still allowing some of the most fantasy points to defenses. The 49ers defense has been a little banged up and not as good as we want, but they'll take advantage of that matchup. They also get the Indianapolis Colts, which will probably be a positive matchup now that Daniel Jones is out for the rest of the season, and then the Bears after that. The Jaguars are another positive matchup, getting theirs against the New York Jets. If we don't have Tyrod Taylor there, that's a pretty positive one. The Jaguars defense is also very good in stopping the run, and they don't have a ton of good wide receivers that they need to defend. So Jaguars are another one, as well as the Bears. They get their matchup against the Cleveland Browns. Shador Sanders has been looking decent, but it's still the Browns. We can also go through and get the Saints, who is by far the number 1 defense in this list of rest of season for the fantasy playoffs continually through those 3 weeks. They get the Panthers here, then the Jets, then the Titans. So if they're out there, they probably are the lowest roster percentage of defenses that actually have good ones through these 3 weeks. You can also get Evan McPherson, the kicker for the Bengals. They get their matchup versus the Ravens this week. kind of a must-win game for them both. Like, technically they're still in the playoff hunt, but I really don't think so. Either way, it's an important game for both of them. Should be a ton of scoring. Positive matchup against the Ravens. You can also get Harrison Mevis in this Rams offense that is scoring an insane amount against the Detroit Lions. They have a pretty good defense, so maybe they can hold them out of the end zone and force more field goals. Also, the traps for this week, the players you should not be adding under any circumstances. Do not waste your time. Tim Patrick is going to be number one. 18.8 fantasy points. It looked pretty decent. Like, out of nowhere, he played amazing for the Jaguars, but he was third in routes run, and when Parker Washington comes back, he's going to be completely useless. Mike Gesicki is probably the number one most added tight end of the week here, but I really do not think you should be adding him. 20.6 fantasy points looks amazing. It looks juicy. It's not really worth it. They're in a 3 tight end committee for the Bengals right now, and he ran less than 50% of the routes. Now, people could see that and say, well, that has to continue. That has to go up. He looked pretty good. But that's always been the case with Mike Gesicki, and every single year and every single week in this offense, he doesn't really play the tight end role in routes run, similar to the Steelers situation. They have 3 tight ends running a ton of routes. Now, Darnell Washington's going to be out for this week, so maybe Pat Freiermuth is an ad if you're in a deeper league. But Troy Franklin is another trap off the waiver wire this week. He has been decreasing in opportunities ever since Pat Bryant has been increasing in opportunities, and they already don't pass a ton in the NFL. So Troy Franklin is a trap, could be dropped as well. Speaking of drops, you can go through and get rid of Daniel Jones. Very, very unfortunate. He'll be out for the rest of the year. There's no reason to hold on to him on your roster. Zach Ertz is in a similar situation. Cedric Tillman was a stash in previous videos, but has proven to not really do much, and you're definitely not starting him in this week's matchup. You can also drop David Njoku for that reason as well. But that's going to finish out this video, guys. Good luck coming into the fantasy playoffs. I appreciate you watching this video, and I will see you in tomorrow's you do not want to miss. I'll see you in that. All glory to the man above.